In NASCAR, there are rivals, and then there are icons who pushed each other to the edge lap after lap, year after year, and became champions. I'm Ryan McGee, and this is Earnhardt, NASCAR's companion podcast, the official series taking you deeper into the life, legacy, and legend of Dale Earnhardt, alongside the new docuseries now streaming on Amazon Prime Video, also named Earnhardt. Today, we're joined by one of Dale's earliest and most enduring rivals, Darrell Waltrip, a three-time Cup Series champion, a NASCAR Hall of Famer, a legendary broadcaster. Darrell didn't just race against Dale. He defined an entire era running door to door with Dale, from intense clashes on the track to their evolving friendship off the track. DW's perspective, as always, is raw, real, and essential to understanding the man behind the Intimidator. Here's my conversation with the legendary Darrell Waltrip. And we are joined now by one of the greatest race car drivers of all time. One of the greatest talkers of all time.
Somebody in here.
And one of the most handsome men I've ever worked with of all time. Man, there you go. DW, thank you for joining us. Listen, I know your understanding of Dale Earnhardt is on a level that very few on this planet have. And to me, it goes back to when we first see both of y'all in this docuseries. What was it like in the 70s when you kind of crashed this party and it was Richard Petty and everybody, and then Dale Earnhardt came in behind you? What was it like for you guys to kind of crash that party?
Well, I felt like I was better than Richard Petty. So, but I was obviously wrong, because Richard Petty's got 200 wins. I got 84. So obviously he's much better than I am. But I think Dale looked at me just like I looked at Richard. I wanted to be better than Richard, but I wasn't. Dale wanted to be better than me. And I think eventually, Dale was better than me, when it comes to driving a car. Dale had exceptionally good car control. He could hang on to a race car better than anybody I've ever seen. So that's the difference in me and him. My car had to be about perfect for me to drive it and win races. Dale, on the other hand, he could take a car that was junk and he could wear you out with it. So that was the difference.
Well, and I think about, like, everybody, I think people kind of saw you coming because of your success, and everyone kind of knew who you were coming from Nashville, and everyone knew who you were because of what you've done there. The perception, at least, has always been that people knew who Ralph Earnhardt was, but Dale kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people, at least to be as successful as he was. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know Ralph. I never met Ralph, so I didn't know him, but I knew of him. And from what I've been told, he was a great driver, probably maybe one of the best drivers of all time. I don't know, but I think Dale wanted to be like his dad, and I think he accomplished that. Then I think he wanted to be better than me, and he accomplished that. I think he wanted to be better than Jeff Gordon. I don't know if he ever accomplished that or not, but anyway, Dale was just Dale, and I just knew Dale. I guess I don't know if I knew him as a race car driver or as a friend. We were frenemies. We were friends sometimes. We were enemies sometimes. We were friends off the track, but we were usually enemies on the track. So I respected Dale. I had a lot of respect for Dale, but there were times when I wanted to kill him. And it was just the way it was, and the same way he felt about me. I'm sure that there were times when he probably wanted to kill me. So, but we were just frenemies, and that was what. And I think that's what made the difference. Or that was what was different.
Well, and that's something we talked to Rusty Wallace, talked to Kyle Petty, and they all said the same thing, which is you'd be so mad at him at the racetrack, but away from the racetrack, that frenemies is perfect. Because, so my perception as a kid growing up in the 80s was the two of y'all wouldn't have walked across the street to pour a bucket on each other if you're on fire. But now that I've known both of you, I know that the relationship was a lot closer than that, wasn't it?
Well, The first time I met Dale, I was at Robert G's shop working on my car, getting ready for the next race. I don't remember where we were going. And he and I think Big Cruz was come down the driveway, had a trophy in one hand, one arm, and a fifth of Jack Daniels in the other. And they had just won the race at Caraway. And he was as high as a kite. And he was excited. He beat Butch Lindley. I think he turned Butch Lindley over. I think is actually what happened. And so he was he was as high as a kite. He was excited, and he wanted to drive my car. Well, I got a late model sportsman car I'm trying to get ready to run Nashville with, but I don't have time to work on it because I'm working on my Cup car. So I told him, I'd say, look, you and your buddies, you get over there and you get that car put together and you can race it at Nashville. And he did, and he drove it coming to Nashville. So he brought the car to Nashville. On Monday morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. I said, what the heck is going on? And it was all the different drivers that he had wrecked. He had wrecked 7 or 8, I think, different ones. And he didn't win the race. I don't even know what happened to him, but he didn't win the race. But they said, if you ever let that guy drive that car again, we're going to whip your butt. And so I never let him drive it again.
But again, for me now, growing up in the 80s, and watching the two of you battle for championships and battle for races, it felt like every weekend there for several years.
Yeah.
None of us knew this backstory. Like none of us knew this friendship. That's the part of it. Am I right? This part that race fans maybe don't understand.
Well, when you're at the track, you have no friends. I mean, you stay in your own little world and you do your own thing and you don't pay any attention to what other people are doing. And so that's the way Dale was. He stayed in his world. I stayed in my world. He stayed in his world. And we collided on the track sometime. But I really think, I mean, I had a lot of respect for Dale. I probably didn't show it at the time, but I had a lot of respect for Dale because I thought he was a good driver. I don't know that he was a great driver. I never really thought about him being a great driver, but I do think he was a good driver. And if you hit him once, he's going to hit you twice. That was one thing you knew about Dale. So I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about Dale at different situations that came up through our careers, different times. But you know what was the best part? When he called me, he called my wife first. He called and said, "Do you think DW would drive the 1 car?" Well, that's when Park was hurt, and I think Hornaday had driven a car, and they were wrecking a car every week. And he said, "Do you think DW would drive our car?" And my wife said, "Well, I don't know. You have to ask him, but I think he would." And I was in the middle of negotiation with Tim Beverly, and there was just a lot going on at the time. And he called me and he said, "You want to drive the 1 car?" I said, "Hell no, I don't drive that car." He said, "Let's think about that." So we talked about it for a little while, and I said, "All right, tell you what I'll do. Let me call Beverly, and if he says I can drive that car, and he doesn't care, then yeah, I'll drive it for you." And so that mended a lot of fences. Dale and I spent some time together. Teresa and Stevie and we spent a lot of time together. We talked a lot about old times, good times, bad times. But I think in the end, I think that was what made the difference, was when I drove that car for him. I think that made a big difference in our relationship.
And what I remember about that, Darrell, was, I mean, we all know we gone through the driver owner thing that everybody went through, and you were driving, but man, you were fast in that 1 car. I'm like, there he is.
Well, that was a good car. The first car I drove was at Bristol, and it was my car. It was my car. We were going to run it at Bristol, but through all the negotiation and everything, we ended up in it. So it ended up being my car that we drove at Bristol. And but from there on, he bought cars from Andy Petrie. He bought different cars from different people, and we built cars. Felipe Lopez built a couple, 3 cars, and we just got better and better and better as time went by. and almost won California, almost won Pocono. So there were some races that I came so close to winning. And if I could have stayed in that car the whole year, I believe I would have won. I think I would have won several races, but it didn't work out. And Steve had broken his leg, and Dale told him, when you get well and you want to drive again, that's your car, and so I can't do anything. So that's how that ended up. When he got well and he got good enough to get back in the car, Dale said, "Look, I told the kid he could have the car, and so you're going to have to step aside," which I did. And I hated that because I think I could have won in that car, but Dale gave a man his word, and his word's his word.
The
In some
relationship
cases, in
that,
some
yeah,
cases.
yeah. But the relationship that y'all had during that time, and again, for me, I mean, I'm thinking about Richmond in the mud that day, right? And y'all compete for championships. The relationship that y'all had in those last several years of his life, it was something to behold in that garage. What was it like? You're talking about you and Stevie and Dale and Teresa, like friends.
We were always friends. I don't, there were only a few times in our career when we weren't friends, and that was in the '80s. And I was beating him, he was beating me, I was beating him, he was beating me, and so we were just beating up on each other all the time. But I think through it all, we remained pretty good friends. Um, I don't know. It was just hard. It was hard to be a Dale Earnhardt fan. I like Dale, good guy, great guy away from the track. But you put him at the racetrack, that's a whole different story. And so we got along pretty good most of the time, but not all the time.
Well, I think about that day at Richmond. I want to go back there, and we talked to Kyle Petty about it because, by the way, everyone forgets that Kyle Petty won that race. But y'all that day in the mud, and I remember watching on TV, and I didn't know you at all. I just knew who I knew from watching on television. But I just remember the look on your face when that window net came down, and that was a man that couldn't believe what just happened. What do you remember about that day?
Well, you got to back that story up a little bit. Junior, I was driving for Junior Johnson, and Junior didn't like Dale, and Dale didn't like Junior, and they were not really good friends at all. So it comes down to the end of the race at Richmond, and Junior's telling me, "You got to pass him. You got to pass him now." I try to pass. He said, "I said pass him now." And I said, "Okay." So I went in the corner, I rammed into him, I slammed him up the hill, and I got alongside him, and I said, "Hey, June Bug, look at this. Whoa." And next thing you know, I was in the fence. So, yeah, the thing about that was Junior was this close to hiring Dale. When I left, I think he would have hired Dale if that hadn't happened. But when that happened, Junior said, "I don't want no part of that guy. I don't want him in my car, and I'm not going to talk to him anymore." And he didn't, that I know of.
Was there a fallout with y'all after that? Like, were
Oh
you talking
no.
about being frenemies? Did you go into an enemy stretch, or how long did it take to mend that?
Well, that was, what was that, '86?
86.
Yeah, '86. So Junior knew I was on the verge that I was going to leave, that I was going to go drive for Hendrick Motorsports, and he didn't like that. He didn't like Rick. He and Rick had a thing going. They'd get parts from somewhere that they weren't supposed to, and Rick would have parts that Junior was supposed to have, and Junior had parts that Rick was over there. So they didn't like each other at all. And when he found out I was going to go drive for Rick Hendrick, he didn't like that. And so, again, a backstory. So we get ready to go to Atlanta, the last race of the year. I think I'm leading the points by a small margin, maybe 11 or 12 points. And Junior says, "We're going to the farm. We're going up on the hill." And the guy said, "Well, we got to get this car ready." "Forget about the car. We're not going to go. We're not working on that car anymore. We're done with that car." And he said, he said, "We're going up on the hill." So they went up on the hill, had a farm up, had a cabin up in the mountains, and they picked apples. And they come back with bushels of apples. And the car was half prepared. It wasn't really in good shape at all to go to Atlanta. And we went. Jeff Wilson had a motor, and we always, every time we run a Jeff Wilson motor, we blow up. And then no disrespect to Jeff Wilson. It wasn't his fault, I don't think. But anyway, we had a Jeff Wilson motor in the car, and they would run. They would run like crazy, but they blow up. And so we went to Atlanta. We had a Jeff Wilson motor in the car. We led the race for a little while, and it blew up. And we went home, and Dale Earnhardt won the championship. And that was the end of that. That was the end of that story.
But you and Dale were good?
Oh, Dale and I were on again, off again. I'd like him a while, he'd like me a while. I'd like him a while, he'd like me a while. Look, there's no other word I can think of that makes more sense than frenemy. We were friends sometime, we were enemies sometime. Friends off the track, not so good on the track. I like Dale. Dale was, you could not help but like Dale. He was the kind of guy that would wreck you, said he wrecked you, intended to wreck you, and then Monday it's like he'd call you and apologize. So we had a good relationship. I have nothing bad to say about Dale Earnhardt. Nothing.
What was your reaction when your brother, when DEI is getting going and your brother is going to go drive for Dale Earnhardt?
Well, Dale and my brother were good friends. They were really good buddies. They went fishing together. They went on the boat together. And see, I always thought that Dale hired Michael to make me mad. But in fact, he hired Michael because Michael was a good, Michael could win Daytona, and he did. He was a great driver, a good driver. He was a good driver. And he won Daytona, I think a couple of times. He won Talladega. But, he and I together, we have 87 wins. I don't know if you know that. Anyway, it was just me. I was aggravated with Dale because he hired Michael, and it really didn't matter. It worked out fine.
Yeah, it worked out great. And you're right. It's like Hank Aaron and his brother, right? They had this with 750 home runs, and Hank had 740.
Like
Well, I tell you, the day I go back to was you and I both went to work for Fox. I've been at ESPN as a producer, and you retired as a driver. And that first Speed Weeks, I'll never forget this. I was producing a show called Totally NASCAR with Steve Burns, and we had Dale on our show upstairs in the building over Victory Lane the Friday before the 500. And then he went downstairs and he did an interview with you that I still think is maybe the best interview that Dale Earnhardt ever did. And it was the famous interview. You said, "I got it all. I got it all, Darrell. I got it all." I'm fascinated by y'all's relationship then, because those were two friends that had seen it all together, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we'd been through a lot together. We'd wrecked each other. I drove his car. So at that point, I'm doing TV. I don't know. I'm a rookie, and he's Dale Earnhardt, and so I'm just asking him questions that a rookie reporter would ask a driver like Dale Earnhardt. And one of the questions was, how much longer are you going to race? And he didn't know. He hadn't made up his mind yet, but he was getting close. And so there was just a lot of backwards and forths that we did together. That I don't know. I think in a lot of ways that interview it helped me. I don't think it helped Dale so much, but it helped me a lot because it helped me understand what it was like to get inside of somebody's head like Dale Earnhardt. So I don't know. I'm glad I did that interview, and I'm glad he answered the question the way he did, and it turned out well.
I could hear it. I could hear the whole thing. Because again, our studio is right next to y'all's, and I could hear the whole thing. And I was like, man, Darrell Waltrip's been doing TV for like an hour, and I've been trying to interview this guy for all these years. This is the best interview I ever heard. It made me mad.
Yeah. Well, Dale and I, we had a great relationship. I mean, I knew Dale from 1970, 75, 76. I knew Dale all those years. We'd had conflicts. We liked each other. We didn't like each other. We were at each other's throat a lot. But in the end, I think driving his car was the thing that really made the difference. I think driving that car and performing the way I did, and showing him that he had good cars and just needed to get a good driver. And Park was a pretty good driver. So I think, I think it worked out well.
Yeah. Tell me about. I think your wife should be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I've said that forever. She's a groundbreaker. She's a pioneer. But
I
tell me
agree.
about. Yeah. No. She's on pit lane, right, scoring cars when no women were allowed anywhere. I mean, to me that was just, I just have always admired that. But tell me about this tradition of Stevie Waltrip leaving a note for Dale, leaving a Bible verse for Dale, before he got in
Well,
a race car every Sunday.
so it's the weekend that Neil got killed, and in Daytona, and I'm on pit road Sunday morning. She gives me a note card that's got a scripture. She always writes scripture on a piece of on a note card and puts it on the dash. And so Dale's walking by, and he said, "Get in here, get in here. You need to get in here and pray with us." So he comes in and he prays, and he grabs the note card out of my hand. And he says, "Great, where's mine?" And of course, Stevie, she panics. I don't have it, but I'll be right back. So she went. She got a note card and then scripture she knew by heart, wrote it down and gave it to Dale. And from that day on, he had a scripture in his car. The day he got killed, he had scripture in his car. So that was special. Stevie and Dale had a special relationship. They were great friends. They were buddies. They were tight, real tight.
There's an understanding in there. I mean, there's those of us that have been in the garage our whole adult life like me, and we try to understand it. But those of you that are on the pit lane, the families, the competitors, there's a connection there. Whether you don't have to like each other, but there's a connection there, isn't it?
Well, we all know. It's just like when in Daytona, when I drove off down pit road and I looked in the mirror and I saw Stevie waving goodbye. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again or not. I mean, in my mind, I knew I thought I would, but there was a side of me that always went down pit road and looked back and think, what if I never see her again? So there's that side of us that all of us drivers have. I think all drivers have a girlfriend, have a wife, have a whatever, and they look back and they're going down pit road and they're waving goodbye. You just don't know if you're going to come back or not. So at least until 2001. From 2001, it hadn't been so bad, but before then, it was like you just didn't know. You weren't sure.
Well, and it's because of that day, February 18th, 2001. And you've talked about that day so much. You talk about it in this film, but I always think about you the next weekend at Rockingham. My hometown, and I think about watching you take on so much of that for so many people, and you addressing the crowd, in the pre-race.
Yeah.
What was it, aside from just the loss of a friend? Well, I've talked to Dale Jr., I've talked to Kelly, I've talked to them about them kind of taking on the grief for so many millions of people. What was it like for you that year? Because so many people look toward you, DW, to help tell them how to get through all this.
Yeah. Well, I lost one of my best friends. Even though we were enemies a lot, we were also friends a lot. So I lost one of my best friends at Daytona, and it was just. I went to the hospital. I was there with Kelly. I went in and I saw Dale, and it was just hard. It was really tough, and they asked me to say the prayer before the race, and I did, and it was just sad. It was just a sad day for everybody. And then Dale Jr. wrecks, and Park wins the race, and that race gets called because he's got to run the next week, and Park wins the race, and it's just so many factors that went into that went into all those situations, at the church, at the track, just so many things that happened that were just hard to deal with. Hard to deal with.
Well, what was it like being in the broadcast booth? And we keep talking about Steve Park, but what was it like being in the broadcast booth when Park won at Rockingham and high-fived his
Well,
brother on the track? And then the next week, when Kevin Harvick wins in that was the 3-car, really. What was it like for you being in the booth? What was that experience like those 2 weekends in 2001?
well, I was mad. I was mad at NASCAR really because they wouldn't mandate the Hans device. And if Dale had a Hans device, I don't think he would have died. I think he would have survived. But they wouldn't mandate it. They said it's optional. It's up to the driver. If he wants to wear it, he can. If he doesn't want to, we're not going to make him. And that was aggravating the heck out of me because I felt like that would have saved Dale's life, and I think it would save a lot of lives at that time had they have mandated the Hans device. And eventually they did, but it was just hard knowing that we had a device. I tried it. I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable, and it was not. You just didn't. It didn't feel good, and so I didn't use it either. But I wish other people had have used it after Dale got killed because I think it would have saved some lives.
Well, and to me, Darrell, his legacy as a race car driver is the Intimidator. But
Yeah.
the fact that I've not had cover of any funerals since 2001, to me, that's as big a part of his legacy as anything.
Oh yeah. Well, the funeral was, Randy Owens saying, and it was just. I left the church. I drove to Rockingham. Dale had always parked. My coach, Dale's coach, we always park beside each other. I get there. There's my coach, and there's a reef in his spot where his coach would normally have been, and I just lost it. I couldn't help it. It affected me like I didn't think it would affect me that way, but it affected me that way, and it was just hard, just really hard.
But it's remarkable, isn't it, watching what a business person that Kelly has become, and Dale Jr. I mean, face of the sport in a lot of people's eyes. I'm not sure how they did this documentary, Darrell. I really don't. I don't know how any of y'all did these interviews, but those two in particular, I thought were just they were very honest about these things that you're talking about. Were you surprised by that?
Well, 20 some years have gone by, and so you remember Dale, you remember things about Dale, but to put it in perspective, you can talk about it now because you couldn't talk about it then. And nobody look, NASCAR, Mike Helton, Bill France, all those people, they don't want to talk about Dale Senior getting killed. They would just hush it. And so me, I gotta express myself. And so I was I think thinking about Dale Senior and what he meant to me and what he meant to the sport and how the sport needed him. I think that made I think it had a big impact on a lot of people. And I don't think a lot of people realized how important he was to the sport until he was gone. And so I think that maybe that's part of it.
All right, so I get you out of here on this, and it's a big question, but it's on paper it's simple, but it's not. What do you think Dale Earnhardt's legacy is? When people ask you that or about Dale Earnhardt, what do you think ultimately his legacy is?
Well, he won 7 championships, tied Richard Petty. Jimmy Johnson did the same thing, tied Richard Petty. He has 76 wins, I think. I think he was he was a bad guy. I mean, any way you want to play it, he was the bad guy. If you hit, like I said, if you hit him once, he's gonna hit you twice. That's just the way he was. And so I saw him win a lot of races that he shouldn't have won. Saw him win some races he should have won. So, but I think I don't think the sport would be the same without him. I think having him been in the sport, been done what he did, and the way he handled himself on and off the track, I think that appealed to a lot of people. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that go to races. They don't do anything else. That's all they do. They go to races. So I think Dale Jr. was a hero to those people, or Dale Sr. was a hero to those people.
Well, thank you for your time, man. It's always good to see your face, and your perspective is still second to none. So thank you, because as you say, you like to express yourself, and I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Hearing from Darrell Waltrip, a three-time champion, a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest voices this sport has ever had, is always a privilege. Few people had a front row seat to Dale Earnhardt's rise like DW had. He didn't just compete against Dale. He challenged him, clashed with him, and ultimately came to understand Dale Earnhardt in a way that few ever did or do now. His stories, his honesty, his perspective give us a deeper appreciation for not just the racer, but the man behind the Superman, the Intimidator. Next time on Earnhardt, NASCAR's companion podcast, we're going to shift gears for a conversation with filmmaker Joshua Altman, the director of this docuseries. Where did they find all the footage? How did they sift through it? What did he learn about this racing world that he's not a part of, and this racing legend that he never met? And what's it like to work for Ron Howard? Follow the podcast and be sure to stream Earnhardt, the docuseries, now on Amazon Prime Video. I'm Ryan McGee. Thanks for riding along.